Morning, Greg with Butter Suspension again. Must be addicted to this new setup because day 2, second video. Today I'm going to rebuild a Fox transfer dropper post. A lot of my videos, the point is to kind of show you how things work, how I rebuild them, you know, all that stuff, tips and tricks. But this video kind of has a specific message, if you will. Some of this stuff is really not user serviceable at home. And I'm going to kind of prove that point more specifically with the transfer by showing you the tools that are required for this. So this is the, I want to say it's like 2016, 17, 18, 19, somewhere in there. There's like a range that these tools will service, and I think it was 2021 when they came out with a new transfer. There's a few differences, there's a couple other tools, but these tools were what's required for this generation post. And these are the transfer specific tools. There are other tools like these shaft clamps that aren't exactly required, but they sure do make it easy. The biggest point I want to make is that it took me about 6 months to decide to buy these tools because this is about $600 worth of tools. For contrast, I know people like to poop all over the reverbs, but I think the tools to do a reverb are like maybe 50 bucks. So you can see if you buy 50 bucks worth of tools and you do one rebuild at 60 bucks, you've basically made your money back. But when you got to buy $600 worth of tools, it's going to take a while to make all that money back. And to be clear, this is not including the setup if you decide to actually fill these with nitrogen. It's not required to fill them with nitrogen. That's Fox's preference, but this filler tool here comes with a little Schrader valve, so you can just hook up a shock pump to it. You have to have a high pressure shock pump, so you got to go up, on some of these you got to go pretty high. You know, ignoring the nitrogen, 600 bucks is crazy. The thing that I realized was I wanted to be able to say, if you bring me your Fox stuff, I can service it. So like, I just felt like a jerk saying, oh yeah, I can do your fork and your shock, but I got to send your seat post back. That didn't make sense. So I finally bit the bullet and bought the tools. The irony being, if you see this tool right here, where's that camera? So this is an old DOS tool. This is the shaft clamps for 30.9 and 31.6 posts. DOS was the first generation dropper post that Fox did, drop on steep stuff. It was a great post. Before I got all the tools to do transfer, I went in and got all the tools to do DOS. And then like the next week I ordered the seal kits too, because I finally had one come in. And the guy said, oh cool, you're getting our last 3 seal kits. And I was like, oh, are you gonna get more in stock soon? He's like, no, we've discontinued the DOS, we're all done with it. Like I had just spent, I think it was like 350 bucks on DOS tools. So that just felt kind of crappy. But you got to pay to play. And I will say I have used these shaft clamps more than any other of like these shaft clamps. I use these all the time on every dropper post that I work on. They're really handy. So it's just nice to have stuff. I'm glad that these translated forward, but still kind of frustrating. But you know, I've done enough transfers now. I've made my money back. It's nice to be able to fix these things. A note about these posts, and we'll get inside here, and I'll show you all the details going on here. But these posts are, to their detriment, internally too durable. if you go on Instagram and you look at any of the suspension shops, there'll always be pictures of these things, basically this section just being filthy, corroded, nasty. I've had 2 of these where I took this lower actuator off, and as soon as I got these posts open, they were dead. Like literally, there's no way to fix them. They were so corroded from sweat and water and all that other stuff. And from the factory, these don't come really with any grease inside the upper and lower posts. It's like just a little bit on the keys, but almost nothing. And maybe that's a California thing, I don't know. But in Seattle, where I'm based, we have a lot of water and sweaty people. And so I put grease inside where all these bushings contact. It makes them move smoother, but also it just helps prevent corrosion. These things just, this part right here is kind of like an unanodized cast aluminum part, and then the part that this threads into also starts to corrode. Also, it's kind of ironic, they anodize these things both because it looks cool, but then they laser etch all these numbers, which is very helpful. But the laser etching gets rid of the anodizing, and then on some carbon frames, and again, sweaty people, this, where the laser etching is, it starts to corrode. And I've seen posts get stuck because of these laser etched numbers. Like it just, instead of, like everything else is perfectly fine, the post is totally fine, but then right here it starts to corrode. And this happens on reverb too, where anodized black and then laser etched, they cut through the anodizing, and then the galvanic corrosion takes over, and it's bad. This one's in good shape, but let's get to it. I'm going to be doing a lot of camera moving, so bear with me on that. And also, the last video I did had some quality issues, and I think that was because I was using a hardwired setup for my internet versus this is now wireless, which we live in the future now that wireless is faster than hardwired. So hopefully this is better quality. All right, let's go. Oh, one other thing, sorry. Obviously you'll need a seal kit, and then it takes this Fox 1.5 clear oil. You'll need some blue Loctite, and then some other just random little picks, 1.5 Allen wrench. I'm just saying this to show you. I really don't believe this is something that people are going to do at home, because if you don't have this stuff, you really can't rebuild the post. So, get all this stuff out of the way. So, it's on threads. This is your actuator. Looks pretty clean. Separate that. Come on, focus. Why don't you focus? There's a circlip in here. And then this slides out. And then see if I can find, there's a little ball bearing right here. Dear camera, ignore the background. Let's flip it. Come on. There it is. So there's a little ball bearing, and it keys into, there's 3 slots inside here. It keys into that spot, so you want to make sure and not lose that. They're very tiny. And then this is what the other set of shaft clamps is for, is to grab this right here. I'm gonna need a third camera, probably. So there's wrench flats here. You just unthread this from the shaft. Again, same thing as every other time. I always try and lay everything out in order. You can also see this is where the mud gets in, because this lower part is not sealed. Come on, buddy. Why do you want to focus on that? There we go. But like right here on this actuator nub, there's a little mud. Not bad. I've seen much, much worse with lots of rust. And this has to slide down. This is the little puller tool. This goes over the actuator. And then the circlip goes back inside, holds this in place. You back this out, thread this in, and this is basically, it's almost like a crank puller, except it's a seat post pusher. Just push it apart, and it'll start to push the seal out here as well as the bushing. At a certain point, you can do it by hand. There comes the main seal and the bushing. And then also the keys. These are the brass keys. Slides apart, keys drop. So this one's actually really clean, which is great. But I'm still going to run some alcohol through it. And push a rag through. See what comes out. And of course, Q-tips. Set that one aside. The keys are replaceable, but when they're this clean, I'll reuse them. This little rubber, I believe this is a bottom out bumper. That's in the kit. Lower bushing. The 2017, I believe, had a different upper bushing and didn't have this O-ring. This isn't a seal, it just kind of preloads this bushing out, so it gives it, make sure it kind of stays engaged with the lower. Sometimes these will, you can see how it's kind of stuck because they get, when you release the post, it goes pop and then it hits these little grooves. It runs into the bushing and creates a little nubbin. You can see that little detent, and that is not part of this the design. It just happens from use. So I'll just twist it, slide it off, and you can see it's all mashed up. the old seal. More Q-tips. Thousands and thousands of Q-tips. On the Fox website, they have all the directions for this. So I'm just kind of run through it. I probably won't use the exact correct technical terms that they do, but the idea is the same. There's basically a bleed port and a fill port. I always break this one loose first because there's pressure in the system. So I just want it to break loose a little bit, and then you go and open this one, assuming it stays, yeah. I don't know if you can hear it. It's very slowly leaking air. You just want to be careful because these little screws are basically holding against a ball bearing. And I don't think it's going to come shooting out, but I don't ever want to find out the hard way. So you'll notice my hand is covering that as it lets out the pressure. Set that aside. Sometimes the ball bearings will get wedged, but that one came right out with my magnetic pick. I always separate these ball bearings from these ball bearings. Sometimes they are the same size, but in the diagrams they show as different sizes, and if you get them mixed up, you can't put the post back together. So I always keep that one with these buddies, and that one goes with these buddies. It's silly that on something of this size, they chose to do two different size ball bearings. They are so close. This is not letting me turn it, so. This one is tight. There we go. When in doubt, RC car tools are always best. Cool. Okay, so now the pressure is out of this part, but there can always still be pressure up inside the oil chamber. So you still want to be careful. There's a little plug here. It's literally like the white pellet that you see on the rear shocks. It's designed to keep people from wanting to touch things. Because if this was all assembled, and you loosen this screw, these are at 275 psi internally, and all this oil would just go shooting out, and it would be very messy. So, and this oil is, I mean, there's a big warning on here. All suspension fluid is relatively not good for you, but this stuff, like, you open the bottle and it smells like, it just smells like death. It's crazy. I'm pretty sure it's like pure poison. So I'm going to move the camera over to this spot. How does that look? Cool. Rubber clamps are your friend. You want to go slow with this because sometimes these are charged. I will cover this. Not bad. There's an O-ring under here. Same thing, I set everything aside in order. This gets shoved down. Careful, oil can squirt out. The clip. Before I pull this cap out, I always clean this because I don't want to scratch anything on the way out. This one's pretty clean. So that's the cap. There's its O-ring. This is the old 1.5. Pretty clean. Oh. This is a little tricky to show. So this is the actuation button or actuation rod. So you'll see more comes out, and then you can actuate the post. And then you'll see the internal bits starting to come right up through. So you need to basically actuate this to the point where you can grab that. More oil. Let it drain. Set the actuator aside. Always clean your clamps every time. Takes an 8mm. This is spring loaded. Let me pull this out real quick. So when you push on this with your actuator, you can't see it in here, but there's a piston that's opening and closing between the two sections. You can almost see it. See how close we can get there. Come on, buddy. But that's what allows the oil to move from one spot to the other, inside the post. This post uses air pressure to push the post up, but it uses oil to keep you in position. So like I was saying, it's spring loaded, so if you just unthread this, it'll go shooting. So I just keep my fingers in this and you'll feel it release. There's a plastic bit here that gets replaced. Spring. Inside there's a ball bearing. It does not come in the kit because it doesn't really need to get replaced, but there's a ball bearing. Save it. And then you just shove the actuator assembly up and out. There's an O-ring here, and then this is the piston. This is where the dirt tries to get in. Because this lower shaft is steel, sometimes water will get in here and it'll rust. Sometimes I've seen rust like all the way up. And so these, if they get really bad, you can replace this rod, but this one's in really great shape. So we'll hang on to that. And then there's no flats on this, you just use Nipex. It's super low torque, it's like 4.5 Newton meters when we put it together. This part gets replaced. So that's in the kit. And then there's this little spacer clip, also in the kit. And we leave that there. Back over here. Okay. This is the lower main seal head, same thing. I always want to be cleaning as I go. Make sure there's no dirt or shmoo. This gets pushed down. Be very careful getting this out. Gotta keep my thumb over it so it doesn't go shooting. Also know that this is a very different size from that one. They look similar, but this one's way thicker. So again, that stays up there. And because that spot is now open, I clean it again. This is just a little, I think it's like an M2 or whatever. It's whatever size that this little head is, and you just thread this in here. And use this as a puller. Kind of wiggle it. So that's one. This one has two O-rings outside and then one inside. Those all get replaced. There's another circlip in here. I really avoid using tools because internally this IFP needs to move, so you don't want to scratch any of that surface. So on that, I will just use my fingernail to push it down and out of the way. Think of a circlip, even though it has little sharp edges, as you move the circlip down, the edges pull away from the outer wall. So I'm not worried about scratching it as long as I push it down like that. And then you can pry it out. This one is exactly the same as that one. So those live together. Little plastic pusher rod. We're going to push the IFP out. There, we keep on hanging on to that. Come on, buddy. There we go. There's also a circlip, you can see it right about here. And that keeps the IFP from going too far in. That doesn't need to come out. And it's way in there, so I just leave that in there. These are usually very, even with slightly dirty oil, they're pretty clean on the inside, but I'll still run a cloth through it, a rag, sorry, not like a actual cloth, because you don't want to leave any schmutz in here. Pretty sparkly. So on this main seal head, you got O-rings, and on the IFP, you have little quad rings. So let's see if I can get this in. What do you want from me? There we go. So that one has quad rings on the inside and the outside. This is where I use my old dull flat blade screwdriver. You can also pierce this, but I just want to eliminate any possibility of having to mess this thing up. And these, because they're exterior, I don't need a tool. Pinch pull those off. Those are different diameters, but you can see that this is kind of a pyramid shape. And then there's another one on the inside. Suspension clean. Suspension clean. This upper piston, this is a 7mm, and then Nipex. You got to be real careful with these because where this O-ring sits is the smallest diameter. I could bend this like just so easy. It's only designed to go in a straight line. It shouldn't have any load, so you really got to make sure that you clamp it here when you take this off. This is also in the kit, so this gets replaced. Very carefully, don't scratch anything, don't bend anything. Oh, come on, buddy. Cool. So that's everything disassembled. I've gotten to the point now where I've done enough of these where I don't have to have everything in order anymore. But it always is so helpful to understand how these things work by always laying it out in order until, like Monarch Plus. You hand me all the parts from a Monarch Plus, I don't need to see the order. I can just put it together because I've done hundreds of them. So, but I also don't take that experience lightly because I know that I got to that point by laying things out and taking pictures. Schematics help, but having it there in front of you, because the schematic you don't always get every angle, but having it laid out, especially in a way that works for your brain, it's really crucial. But just like the Monarch Plus, I've done enough of these now where I don't need to have everything laid out perfectly. So, and Fox's website has really great instructions on this stuff. So that's always wonderful to have. Okay, seal kit. There's sometimes there's like one piece in these kits that never gets used, and I think it was a mistake. Like when they created the parts list for this, like it's always in these kits, and I've never seen one inside a transfer. But it doesn't mean it doesn't have purpose. I always also open the bag and let stuff roll out away from the edge. That way, anything that is round, like this little tiny ball bearing, I want to make sure that it rolls that way and not off the bench. And these come with all the little seals not in a bag, so they can kind of go ripping anywhere. Here's the new piston and the new seal head. New bushing, main wiper, quad ring. So here's that little white piece I was talking about. I don't know what that does. I don't think it has anything to do with anything. I think they just accidentally listed it. Maybe somebody at Fox knows and they can tell me, but I just throw them away because they don't. There's nowhere in here that I know of. So you want to take this little spacer clip, preload it on the shaft. So this little clip goes right here. This gets threaded on by hand. When you go to torque everything together, it's all 4.5 Newton meters. So it all clicks at the same time. So that doesn't need any torque until we finish it off. That's all final assembly stuff. Okay. Grease. This tool's for sizing the little blue bushings on this thing. So they install them at the factory, and then you have to run it through this to get them to the correct size, otherwise they're too tight. This is also the installation tool on that seal head, so it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but it's kind of like a funnel. And I'll use a wooden stick and just shove it through. And then this tool goes over here. Because then when you get it all assembled, you size it again. Thread these together. This does not take a ton of torque. It's just kind of, hey, make sure they don't go anywhere. It's a pretty small fine thread. And then I will grease it again. And grease this O-ring. And because this is where this thing rubs inside the main tube, I'll grease that too. Oh, that's a terrible angle. Cool. So then this goes down. I always use a wooden stick for this because I don't want to scratch anything. These are bamboo skewers for doing shish kebabs. They're awesome. Push that down in. And then you want to test this. Just make sure that it moves. There's going to be a little friction because it's a double bushing. It's a pretty stiff fit. Ball bearing. Spring. And then this is a new little plastic piece that goes under this head. Where's the camera? This is directional. I don't know if I can capture that. It kind of has like a C shape, and it wants to go down. The C shape goes down over this thing. And so what I'll do, because this is spring loaded, is I'll hold this in one hand, load it in the tool, and that way I can kind of guide it, push it. The spring's pretty stiff, so you gotta be careful. Oh, come on, buddy. Oh. Very spring loaded. Come on. Okay, we'll take it off. Either way, I'll keep the tool, or the socket, on there. That's good. 4.5 Newton meters. And to make sure that this isn't spinning in the clamps, I hold the shaft. That way I know that it's torquing properly. Cool. All right. So this, as an assembly, is ready to go. You want to test it. Make sure that it springs back. So that's good to go. More squeaky camera movements. Alright. And the rest is just loading up seals where they go. Don't get your quad rings folded. I'll preload this inner one. Oh, a little something in there. I'll preload the inner one with Slick Honey. And then I use the tool to kind of push it in. I want to make sure that it doesn't get flipped or twisted, so I always load it a certain way so that it at least starts with the correct edges going in. There's that. So this one, there's two O-rings that are the same and then one that's different. This one has that pyramid shape. So the upper seal cap, if you will, gets the other small one. Set that aside. Same thing, I'll load this one. Not a ton, but I just want it slick in there. The reason why I do this is because the O-rings should be greased, but dealing with an actual greasy O-ring to me is tricky. So since this is going to be full of grease, I am greasing the O-ring, but also this hand gets to use a non-greasy O-ring, if that makes sense. Load that in, and then I just make sure and coat everything. There's a bushing in here. This one goes up here, so that goes over there. Okay, cool. And that gets there. It's a little top out rubber plate. You don't have to, but you might as well line up the holes because details matter. Okie dokie. Inside the post, where the IFP is going to go, you slather that. This IFP is directional. You want that little hat shape to go out. So grease this really well. Make sure everything is slick. You gotta get past all the little spots for the circlips. And then you want to shove this until it hits that middle circlip. And then to make sure that it doesn't go anywhere, so there's two, you can see there's two grooves right here. So this first one goes in that second groove. So same thing, I'll run this in at an angle so none of these little edges are going to be scratchy. And I'll use my fingernail to kind of guide it. Come on, buddy. And you really want to make sure that that is engaged, because one of the first ones that I did, it wasn't engaged, and I went to go fill this with oil, and I'm cycling it, and all the oil came out because I didn't have engaged. So that's pretty crucial that that's in there. Another crucial thing about using the right tools is this bullet tool. Because these seals, there's sharp edges here, so you really want to make sure and use the right tools. Grease this up. Since this is going inside here, this bushing in that O-ring get greased. And then, let's see if I can do this on camera. Basically, you're going to fish this through to find that. So the bullet tool goes through. And then the fill portion of this can only happen. So if I'm moving, I don't want to move the IFP. It's usually not an issue, but I'll shove the IFP down while I push the bullet tool through. And then this is the correct distance for filling. So that bullet tool is too greasy. Come on, buddy. There we go. Okay. So now you can just start to see the actuator inside the IFP. And I've got a spot right here to fill with oil. Time for coffee. Okay. This can be messy, so I try and catch this. Oh, I wish you could smell this. This oil just smells like petroleum. So you can see the levels like right there. Now I'm going to move this over to the rubber jaws. Come on, buddy. Cool. So oil is going to come spraying out. So you really want to just go slow. You'll see it start to kind of fill a little bit. And again, I cover this with paper towel. And there's a distance that I'm kind of looking for here. I want that actuator to be right about there. You can be a little bit more, it's not a big deal. But then, this doesn't need to be full, you just want to kind of cover it, because now we're going to start evacuating the bubbles. This is the actuator cap, I guess. So I'm going to thread this onto the bottom of the post, and then this plug holds the actuator open. It basically just opens that valve inside the actuator so that oil can pass freely back and forth. So I'll just barely start to engage this, and then I'll thread it onto the bottom. And hopefully you'll see when I thread this on, bubbles will appear. There you go. So now the system's open. Very slowly, I'm actually going to run this down because I want it to be kind of locked so I can push against it. And I'll hold a flashlight because I like to see all the bubbles moving. And then you just cycle it. Bubbles come out, bubbles float to the top. The IFP will sometimes move inside here. And that's okay, but it does kind of change the fluid height. So you kind of got to work within whatever it's doing, and we'll take care of that in the final step when we actually set the IFP. Lots of bubbles, lots of bubbles. You can do this for a while. It's kind of crazy. These posts, you'll get them in for service and they're rock solid. They're gritty and they're dirty, but they are rock solid, and there will be a ton of air up in this top section. I don't really understand how that works. I'm assuming that the actual part of the post that actually holds you up might not have to do with this oil chamber. I am no engineer, but it's crazy. You'll take them apart and there's a bunch of bubbles in here and it's just rock solid. So again, kudos to Fox for making a post that just really doesn't care. But they still need maintenance. When the corrosion sets in, it goes pretty fast. Like I said, I've had 2 of these where I got them open and that was the last time they were ever on a bike because they were so corroded inside. It would have cost more in replacement parts than the price of a new post because economy of scale does not apply to one-offs. So you do that bunch and then I'll remove the actuator. Get the flashlight going, and then you can open and close it at the bottom and big bubbles will start to pop up. Let's see, I don't know if we can see that. Let me move this so you can see what I'm doing here too. So I'm just actuating, I'm holding onto the rod and then I'm actuating this just with, it could be anything stiff. It's just because I have to take this off to do it, I use the tool as a secondary tool. You put it back on, do some up and down cycles again. Then I'll do one more of the actuator at the bottom, and at this point I'll also introduce the Ifp Setting Tool in a second. So here's the Ifp tool. They come in different sizes. These are for 100 and 125 mil drop, has a different Ifp setting than the 150. And then later, I bought this tool before the 175 came out, and you can kind of see I etched on there 175, because the 150 and the 175 are the same. This is a 6-inch drop, it's the 150 post. So this needs to go up and inside, and then it sets the Ifp in the right spot. And you can see there's a big gap here because the Ifp has moved down, so I'm going to shove it up. But you want to do it with the actuator on. Because that opens the valve and allows you to move it properly. So then you pull it to full extension with the Ifp tool in place. Unthread this. Now that that's all set, we can put the cap back on. Slick honey, you want to just drop this in place. Oil's going to go all over the place, and that's okay. Because this is now a little volcano, if you just push on this, oil will go everywhere, so cover it. You can see the oil just fills it. You're going to push this all the way down below the snap ring spot. Click. Tool. Threads in. I'm going to pull this up against that snap ring. That will create bubbles here. And put a little bit of oil here, not a lot. Basically, I'm going to fill this up, and then you kind of tip it around just to make sure all the bubbles come out. O-ring goes in first. Make sure that sets down in the groove. And you tighten this down. And you hold this in place. This doesn't have to be crazy tight, but you don't want to go anywhere. Now that's all capped off. So that's all sealed up. A little bit of float fluid in here, not much. Once again, a bullet tool. Get the angle on this. Hopefully it's not too weird of an angle. Oh. There's that. Okay. Seal head, slick honey, slick honey, slick honey, slick honey. Slide this down. More slick honey. Ifp tool is also this seal head pusher. Circlip. Same thing, you want to make sure that it's in the groove. Use my janky little screw. This needs to get pulled up. And make sure I engage those threads because it's tiny. Snap. Also be careful to not scratch this. This is pretty hard stainless steel, but always avoid it if possible. All right, then we put our very tiny ball bearings back in, one at a time. They are, one is a fill side and one's a bleed side. So what I'll use this stick to basically, I don't want to put a screw in this one yet, so I'll drop this here. It just kind of acts as like a plug. Did that even go in? Wow. Yeah, cool. And these very tiny set screws need blue Loctite. I want to say it's like 1.1 Newton meters torque or something. Almost immeasurable. But think of it as you're using a 1.5 millimeter Allen wrench. So no matter what you do, there's not a lot of torque here. Come on. have to be very careful because one of these holes is threaded, but I will use these two holes gently as a way to hold this. I just want to snug this up so that it holds. And then we have the fill tool, and then there's a little actuator knob that holds the actuator open, and then there's a little plastic thing that keeps everything in line. So this slides over that, and that hole internally lines up with that bleed port. But before we do that, got to open the actuator. And then in the instructions, the Fox instructions, they show you that you can use nitrogen, which I have done in the past, but it is so finicky to get this setup set in a way that the nitrogen tool can come over, and there's a lot of maneuvering there, and the overall actual benefits of nitrogen I don't think it's not night and day. It's not going to change how the post works. 275 psi is the pressure you need. Yes, nitrogen is a dry air, but this thing is not running into issues because of moisture in the air. So I use this setup because to me this is way more stable. And it's faster. That way I can leave my nitrogen set up for rear shocks. And this works just fine. So this goes to 275. There are different pressures for different years for different drops. So 275 doesn't apply to every single one, but this one is 275. And then slowly, you'll always hear air leaking out of the pump, out here. Pull that out. Actuator knob off. Slide this off. And then same thing, I will plug this hole because I don't want to drop the ball bearing in there. Drop that buddy in there. These take blue Loctite because they're so low torque, but they can come loose. So I'm going to make sure those get Loctited. Not a ton. And I use a ball end on these once I get it started because it's hard to get that angle. Don't crush it. Don't crush it. Alright, so that's the post as an upper mechanism. And the rest of this is just reassembly. Squeaky setup. Oh, come on, buddy. There we go. Okay, so this is where I kind of split from Fox's directions. They don't say put any grease in here. The idea is that these IGUS bushings are self-lubricating, which is to me a way of saying we designed this in California. I know that these are quote-unquote self-lubricating, but man, when these get any dirt in them at all or any water, and up here in the Northwest they're going to get tons, they just don't work as well. And then plus this little keyway here mixed with brass, mixed with aluminum, all that stuff just starts to corrode if you let enough dirt and water get in there. So I always lube the crap out of these things, and you don't need to do more than whatever's going to cover the surface, but I certainly put in more than the 0 that they recommend. They really only say put put grease on these keys, and I'm just not going to go with that. I've had way better luck with these long term up in this area. So I'll grease that inner part. Slide this on as a safety buddy, just to protect this, because there's no bullet tool for this. It's a pretty loose fit over this. Come on. And then pop it back off. This is like a castellated, and it goes this way. Little tiny O-ring provides pressure. I'll grease that a little bit. And then before you slide this all together, you got to put the head back on. Doing this off camera because it's just over here. Just cranking this on. Okay. So I'm going to grease all these. I want grease all over this thing. Grease in these keyways. These posts can only go together one way. On reverbs, these keyways are symmetrical, so you can put it in one of three ways, and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect anything. It just makes it so the logos aren't lined up. But on this one, it's kind of tricky to see, but these two are closer together than this one is from that one, and this one is from that one. So they made it so that you can only put this together one way, which is fine. It's just, I thought that was an interesting difference between the two. Grease, grease, grease. And then before I get the keys on there, the ball bearing that indicates where this lines up with the logos has to be kind of preset, and so you just grease this spot, take your ball bearing. I'll load it up in the wrong spot on purpose because I need to load this together, twist it, and then find the keys. So I just kind of put it off center. You'll see that this keyway lines up with this bolt hole, so that's what is that? That is the back of the post. Whereas these keyways line up on the sides of that. So I line the ball bearing up with the keyway that lines up with that one. Oh, and we need to have the circlip in first. Cool. So find that keyway, find that ball bearing, line it up, it'll start to slide. The reason why I put the keys on after I get this bushing in is because they always want to like pop out. So it's tricky sometimes with this bushing. It doesn't want to get, let me flip this around. It doesn't want to get lined up and slotted in. It'll want to pop out, so you kind of got to wiggle it. Sometimes you got to squeeze it. Come on, buddy. There we go. Oh, popped off. Really want to just wiggle it into place. Come on, Grumpy. Of course, because the camera is rolling, this is the hardest one in the world to do. You can use a screwdriver gently to kind of pop it in. There we go. So now that that's started, I can load the keys up. These also, once I put them in, because they're packed with grease, they should stay put. But more grease. And then, because this isn't exactly lined up, I'll hold these keys and twist it until I find the slots. Come on, buddy. Nope. And the keys will want to shove sometimes. So you gotta just tell them who's boss. There we go. So, and that'll hit the circlip. And then we're gonna use the pusher tool. So this pushes against the bushing, shoves it in. And it's usually pretty tight. And then secondarily, you use the same tool, and again, I'll put a little more grease because I want something under here. Slide this down, and the exact same tool does it again with this wiper seal. This one goes in a little tighter, so I'll do this over here. Almost done. Clean it all up, wipe it down, got to test it. I'll put a little dab of grease. Oh, just terrible camera work today, terrible. There's always extra grease here, so I'll put some on the actuator, that rod, and then the actuator itself has this little thing that flips out. And it engages a little pin, so I'll grease that, and I'll grease that, and then this threads together. Don't have to go crazy, it should be pretty darn snug. Darn it. But you'll see that I'm holding this by hand to snug it. Nothing really acts on it to unthread it. And this is 31.6. Oh geez, come on. Maybe we'll go, there we go. So now I can reach underneath, grab the actuator, and then push here. And then when I move it down, it should be totally rock solid. It should make a pretty good pop, bonk, and then this does not move. I'll give that one a thumbs up. Cool. Last bit is there's a little pellet that sits inside. It's the little do not touch pellet. Just a little piece of plastic that you use to plug this hole. so that people don't spray oil all over their living room. There you go. One Fox transfer rebuilt, ready to be shreddy. So, yeah, tools are expensive. I really don't think this is something people should be doing at home, unless you want to invest in all the stuff. But you know, $600 in tools to rebuild a $400 post, that's a severe hobby. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope you maybe learned some cool stuff. As always, like, subscribe, and as always, please leave a comment. I'm always happy to answer questions and spread the information. So, have a good day. Thanks for watching.